Hey, what's going on? I'm Isaac, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about building basic frameworks, right? Which sounds super boring, but if you can get this figured out and you can start applying this in your life, whether it's business, whether it's relationships, whether it's fitness, it doesn't matter. Everything that you do is going to be much easier. It's going to be much more efficient, and you're going to probably have better results, but you're definitely going to be able to do more with less stress, which is absolutely huge. So, first of all, what is a framework? Okay, so a framework is basically a explanation of a structure of how you run a system. Okay, which sounds like a lot, I get. But basically, a framework is just kind of a repeatable process that you can do over and over again that allows you to add in different inputs and allows you to get some sort of a similar result, right? So basically, like if you have like a template to how you do your workouts, right? That's going to be a framework for you because it allows you to swap exercises in and out. It allows you to do different stuff, but at the same time, there's a structure and there's a system in there. So it's much faster to change your workouts. It's much faster to kind of, see what you want to do a little bit differently versus like staring at a blank page from scratch, right? So this is why templates and frameworks are so important for your life, not only when it comes to jobs and that type of thing, but when it comes to almost anything you do. If you can get as much stuff as you can into frameworks, then it allows you that kind of freedom to be able to say, okay, what do I want to really focus my effort, my energy on versus, again, staring at a blank page all the time. So that's kind of why we use frameworks. Also, the other thing is that adults tend to learn better from frameworks. They tend to learn better from systems that are already in place by a process called scaffolding. Most adults don't just learn new facts out of the blue. Instead, they learn better if they take what they already know and you introduce new information, and then they kind of compare and reason their way through it. So maybe even something totally different, like I'm trying to think of something now, but like so if you do things a certain way, you make recipes a certain way, right? People talk about analogies like baking a cake is going to have your eggs, your flour, your sugar, all this other stuff. And, you got to be able to bake it a certain amount of time. So let's say you bake your cake at 350 degrees for 45 minutes, and that's how a cake turns out right, right? Well, if you tried to bake your cake at 700 degrees for half the time, you would have a burned cake. You wouldn't have a faster thing. So this is a way that if you want to explain patience to an adult and doing things by a process, you could use that analogy, and that makes sense a lot faster versus just trying to explain something fresh from scratch. So some of my favorite frameworks that I use with a lot of my clients and that I think that probably you could apply almost across the board versus something that's specific to your job would be like a basic nutrition template. So setting up like a system where you have your anytime meals and your workout meals, or you have like a breakfast system where you're going to do one protein source, you get 5 or 6 different protein sources. Then you're going to do one piece of fruit, and then you're going to do one carbohydrate, or whatever it is you decide to do is your framework, your system. But then that way you're not going to be staring necessarily at the fridge and saying, oh, what do I want to do for breakfast? Instead, you can say, okay, well, I know I need a fruit. I know that I'm going to use one of these 5 protein sources, and I know I'm going to need some sort of carbohydrate. And you can kind of just go boom, boom, boom. And it eliminates some of that decision fatigue from your brain. So setting up a basic nutrition template for your life is like absolutely one of the easiest things that people can do once they get the hang of it, and it provides a huge reward across anything you're going to do. The other one I like is my 3 circles of leadership. And I use this with my leadership clients to explain kind of how we build a leadership structure. So it operates as 3 concentric circles. I'll probably do a video on this kind of unrelated to this topic, but just so that you have a sense of what I'm talking about. It starts with self-leadership. You need to be able to lead yourself before you can lead others. But once you get beyond that, then you have specific leadership where you are very well respected in a certain area. So maybe it's your job. You're really good at what you do, so you can command leadership there. But then outside of that, you don't really have a lot to stand on. But then you get to the point where you have sphere leadership, where all the way around you, you're basically a leader. And this is where you've reached kind of that final level of leadership where you have a leadership presence, you have leadership skills that you can apply to almost any situation, even if it's not something that you necessarily have a direct influence in. That's kind of the three concentric circles of leadership. And with that framework, it's very easy for me to see where somebody is. And it's very easy for them to kind of see where they are and what they need to work on to get to that next level. Because that's where a framework can be really useful as well, because you start to break down where things possibly are doing really well or where things are falling apart. And if it's you try something and it doesn't work from scratch, where did it go wrong? Who knows? But if you have like a 5-step framework that you went through and it didn't work, you can look at it and you can say, okay, well, step 1, that did okay. All right, well, cool, worked on that. Step 2 did okay. Yep. Oh, step 3 is where we had the breakdown. Oh, okay. Now we know where we can really kind of fine tune in and look to see what we need to do better next time. Versus, again, if you're just starting from scratch with no direction, you got to go through the whole thing all over again. So when it comes to building frameworks for your life, building frameworks for your job, building frameworks for relationships, whatever you're going to do, there's kind of a 4-step process that I really like to look at for my people. And the first one is you got to analyze that situation. Just whatever it is, probably not in the moment, but once you kind of the dust settles a little bit, you can do kind of the after action report with yourself or with other people. You kind of analyze the situation, see what happened, see what's going on, see what the results were. And then from there say, okay, well, what are the commonalities or what are the things that probably going to keep showing up again? Look for those patterns, get those kind of nailed down. Say, okay, well, now we got something that we know that we're looking for this, and this. And then from there, be like, okay, well, what are potential outliers? What are potential oddities? What are things that are not going to kind of fit the norm? They'll throw a monkey wrench in this whole thing. Okay. And so from there, that gives you the kind of the ups, the downs, the middles, and you can say, okay, I've got a pretty good thing where I know that, or I suspect that most of the time it's going to follow this pattern. In these few situations, there'll be outliers. If you're at the point of 50-50 outliers, they're not outliers anymore. But so get the patterns as squared away as possible, and then test it. Next time you go through a thing, test it out. Next time you go through, analyze that. Say, okay, well, what do we need to tweak? What do we need to do a little bit better? This is like if you're trying to teach somebody how to do your job, or a job working for you. A lot of entrepreneurs are into this trouble. They have like this whole thing. They've created this whole system in their mind without realizing it because they've just done the job, right? But then over time, you start hiring employees to take certain parts of it over, and you don't really know how to train them, how to teach them, because you just do things. You've been doing it for so long. This was one of my problems when I first started hiring trainers. I just had done it for so long. I did the same thing, but I didn't know how to teach it to them. So what I ended up having to do is I had to start breaking down and filming as I was doing things, and taking notes as I was doing things. And so I realized over time that there were certain commonalities that I was doing. There are certain things I was going to do over and over again. I was going to assess clients this way every time. I was going to, if they had this situation, I was going to do this. If they had this situation, I was going to do that. If a client asked me this question, I was going to answer it this way. And so over time, I kind of kept, documenting these situations, and I developed a system that I could then take and I could train new trainers with and be like, hey, look, this is how we run a warm-up. This is how we run strength work. This is how we do this. This is how we answer client questions this way. And because we had that framework, it was much, much easier to teach them. It was much faster, and we were able to get much more consistent results, which as a business owner is massive. But in your life, that's possibly even more massive. If you can get consistent results and you know what's happening every time, that's a huge win. You're going to be so much further ahead of everybody. So don't just run things by the seat of your pants, rather. Build a framework. And if there's an opportunity for you to build a framework, if you're going to run into situations over and over again, chances are there's that opportunity. Take advantage of it and start building a structure and a framework. You'll be able to get things done much faster. You'll be able to be much more efficient. You'll be able to be much more effective. And that's going to save you huge bandwidth that you can then spend on doing whatever the heck you want. So if this was helpful for you, then by all means, hit subscribe, hit like. I appreciate it. Share this with a friend. Building this channel up to basically help you not only achieve more success, but achieve more success with the capacity to actually enjoy that success when you get it.